Okay, so good morning everyone. This is my video lesson for lesson 4 child abuse, and I am Shashie Castillo. First, let us define child abuse. Child abuse is doing something or failing to do something that results in harm to a child or puts a child at risk of harm. Child abuse can either be physical, sexual, and or emotional. Neglect or not providing for a child's needs is also a form of abuse. Yung purpose po natin as adults is, or as parents na lang, to the parents of a child is to care for the child, to provide their needs. So if we are failing to provide those things and to provide the child of their needs, then that is also a form of abuse. Links between neglect and abuse are clear, and later psychological, emotional, behavioral, or intrapersonal disorders are manifested. The basis of these linkages is the impact on the brain development of abused and neglected children. Most abused children suffer greater emotional damage than physical damage. So ito naman po, this is due to the trauma na the child develops during the period or the time of abuse that they have experienced. Effects of child abuse. An abused child may become depressed. He or she may withdraw, think of suicide, or become violent. An older child that has experienced abuse may use alcohol to try and cope or become abusers themselves. The effects of early maltreatment on a child's development are profound and long-lasting. So yun nga po, this is also due to the trauma that they have experienced as children. Introduction to child abuse. This discussion strongly suggests that parents should have an effective treatment that requires an effectively attuned relationship with their children. If their children feel secure, hence their development is balanced. So this is important po kasi when we have a tight-knit bond with our parents, then we tend to share more as kids. So when we share something that is a little bit concerning, pwede agad siya magawa ng paraan ng parents natin. Or even if hindi siya parents, it could be any relative na you can trust and that cares for you, so they could do something about it. Child abuse, this refers to the treatment of a child, whether habitual or not, which includes any of the following. A. Psychological and physical abuse, sexual abuse, cruelty, neglect, and emotional maltreatment. B. An act which could either be verbal or physical degrades or demeans the intrinsic worth and dignity of a child as a person. C. Deprivation of a child's basic needs. And D. Failure to give medical treatment and or attention which results in serious impairments of his growth and development or in his permanent capacity or death. So, ito pong mga types of abuse na to, this could be done, pwedeng physical lang, sexual lang, or neglect lang, or cruelty lang, or this could be all a combination of abuse done to a child. Ito naman pong sa belittling, what the perpetrator tends to do here is they make you feel small. If you feel small, mas madali ka nilang may intimidate. And therefore, pag mas madali ka nilang may intimidate, hindi ka magsusumbong kasi you're scared of them. You're gonna think na hawak ka na nila. So, that's what they do. Kasali na po dyan yung deprivation and yung maltreatment. That's what the purpose of those acts are, is to make you feel small so that you become more scared of them and then they have you trapped. So number 2 is sexual abuse. It is any form of sexual act between an adult and a minor or between two minors where one exerts power over the other. A. It is any employment, use, persuasion, inducement, enticement, coercion of a child to engage in or assist another person engaging in sexual intercourse or lascivious conduct, or the molestation, prostitution, or incest with children. So, ito naman pong sa two minors, it could be that the other one has more power over the other, or it could be that the other minor is a little bit more older than the other one, or it could be that yung other minor is or was abused din in the past. That is why he became or she became an abuser, he or himself. And dito naman po sa A, it could be by force na you are sexually abused as a child, or it could be that you are groomed by the perpetrator themselves, especially if they are significantly older than you or they are close to you. Na they brainwash you and make you believe that it is okay and there's nothing wrong with doing these things, and or they try to imitate love and make you think that they love you, and then later on they'll reveal themselves for what their true purpose is, and that is to abuse the victim. Number 3 naman po is battered child syndrome. This refers to child abuse and neglect. Forms of child abuse: physical abuse, psychological abuse, deception, child trafficking, neglect, child labor, abusers and neglectors. Under this is the special parent and the special child. Forms of child abuse naman po, physical abuse tayo. Child physical abuse is the non-accidental injury of a child. Many states add other factors to the legal definition, such as age of the abuser and the nature of the injury. Injuries include bruises, lacerations, blunt trauma, fractures, head trauma, shaking, burns, and poisoning. Usually po in cases where you see na in court na a person is being charged of physical abuse against a child, they'll say na one time lang siya and accidental siya. When in fact it is not, kasi when it happens on multiple occasions and many times mo na nakikita na nasasaktan yung bata, significantly na nasasaktan yung bata, it means that it is intentional and you know what you are doing. And usually, physical abuse tends to escalate po as time goes by. Psychological abuse. Emotional or psychological abuse is a pattern of behavior that impairs a child's emotional development or sense of self-worth. This may include constant criticism, threats, or rejection, as well as withholding love, support, or guidance. So, ito naman po is belittling, emotionally abusing a child to the point na they think they are unworthy. Here we have deception naman. It is the deprivation of child's proper learning opportunities by giving them incorrect ideas and concepts. As a result, they may develop an inclination to solve problems through violence, promiscuity, or drug abuse. So here naman po is technically you are misinforming a child, kind of like brainwashing or whitewashing what should be the truth po. And as a result, nagiging violent yung bata, and as they grow older, they tend to think na drug abuse and alcohol abuse and other likes are a better solution. Okay, now we have child trafficking, the illegal recruitment, transportation, transference, harboring, and or receiving of children for the purpose of exploitation. So ito naman po is yung mga nagbibili or mga pinagbibili ang mga bata for the sake of money. Neglect. Child neglect is a form of abuse, a behavior of caregivers that results in depriving a child of their basic needs, such as the failure to provide adequate supervision, healthcare, clothing, or housing, as well as other physical, emotional, social, educational, and safety needs. So, ito po yung, in other words, is napapabayaan yung bata. Not giving them proper care and their needs. And hindi na nila yun nasa-satisfy. Child labor. This refers to the exploitation of children through any form of work that deprives children for their childhood, interferes with their ability to attend regular school, and is mentally, physically, socially, and morally harmful. Such as exploitation is prohibited by legislation worldwide. So, kung yung sa child trafficking naman po is binibenta mo yung bata for the sake of money, dito naman is pinagtatrabaho mo yung bata for the sake of money. So now we have abusers and neglect. So under that, first we have the special parent. The parent who was the potential to be abusive most often has also been abused during his or her childhood. He has been described as emotionally immature, lacking self-esteem, inexperience, and having unrealistic expectations of child, like having in mind that they should be someone to love me and never leave me. Okay, so ito naman po, yung the special parent naman po is mostly they are so attached to their children to the point na they are controlling and overbearing na. So, now we have naman po the special child. The child is viewed differently from other children. In the family, the child may be physically disabled or maybe with special meaning. So, ito naman po yung mga childs na usually they have Down syndrome. Ang iba may mga disorders, personality disorders. Others are mostly here in the Philippines are undiagnosed. That is why most of the time they are misinterpreted and not given the proper care. Okay, so moving on naman po to characteristics of abusive parents. Number 1 is inadequate parenting skills and lack of knowledge concerning normal child development are exhibited. Emotional immaturity with poor impulse control is often demonstrated. They are socially isolated, especially from the community resources, and lack of social support and support system, rather. And lastly, they often come from families with violent parents. So, na po yung sinasabi natin earlier na abused children tend to grow up as abusive adults din kasi they adapted. As the saying goes nga, history repeats itself. So, moving on naman po tayo to helping cope with child abuse. Children who are victims of sexual abuse will seldom, if not never, share his or her experience with their parents, especially if it is in the form of incest. This is due to the fact po na it is very shameful on their part. Kasi in their mind, they're thinking, how could I let this happen? Why did this happen? Why did they do this to me? Especially if you tend to realize it as you grow older. That is why you just tend to keep it to yourself. Okay. The best thing that parents can do in order to support their children is to reassure them that they believe them and that his or her emotions are valid. The failure to do so could be even more devastating than the abuse itself. The most significant factor that can reduce the negative impact of sexual abuse is support and belief from parents and significant other adults. Stay calm. Should not show your child that you are in distress by the fact that he or she has shared with you. Avoid being hysterical. Let the child know that he or she is not blamed for what has happened. Make her understand that it is not her fault. A child's own coping capacity will have an effect given that the child had had any other serious life stressors other than those she has already encountered. The self-esteem resiliency of a child are already at their lowest, hence she or he faces even greater difficulties from the additional stress of sexual victimization. The child's developmental level, age, and gender influence the effect of sexual behavior. If the victim is still young, chronologically and developmentally, there will be strong and serious negative effects on the child. Sexually abused victims might act out in anger, while some might direct the anger towards themselves. Others might become depressed or suicidal. Others might belittle themselves, and most, if not all, blame themselves for what had happened. The child who is sexually abused by someone that he or she trusts and knows will have a more serious effect on the victim than the child who is a victim of a non-family member. The child appears to be more seriously affected when physically abuse, threats, or intimidation comes into play along with the sexual abuse. Moving on to sexualized behaviors of child abuse. Children who are sexually abused at an early age are permanently introduced to sexual acts. They experience sexual stimulation and pleasure, hence they are unable to understand but they cannot comprehend because of their young age. They also tend to increase their interest in sexual matters. Their sexual behavior are learned in response to their experience with the perpetrator or sexual abuse acted upon them. The victims of sexual abuse appear to have more problematic behaviors in the area of sexuality. This includes 1. Acting out with peers sexually, 2. False or pseudo-mature sexual behavior, 3. Excessive masturbation, and 4. Confusion on their sexual identity, what is appropriate sexually between children and adults. And lastly, I would just like to say that if you know someone that has a kid, or if you know a kid that is suffering from abuse, I urge you to call for help. So these are some of the violence against women and children um, hotlines. And I would like to leave a quote: "Do not be ashamed of your story. It will inspire others." You you are now in a place wherein you're thinking of telling other people your story. Do not be ashamed because it will inspire others and you are not alone. So thank you. That is the end of my report. This is Shashie Del Castillo, and goodbye.